So hello everyone, how are you? We have started the British literature. One video is already uploaded. If any of you have missed, go and watch. Everything is prepared in short, detail, but in short highlighted points with all the minor and major characters, important lines about the specific writer or critics who have mentioned. So I hope you have liked. And if you want the PDF where everything is mentioned in this, you can do accordingly. Okay. So today is going to be the second part of the British literature. The remaining writers and their important works that can be the question can be appear in the exam related to all the characters, minor, major, important lines. So we will discuss today. Okay. So do subscribe the channel, share to all the students, your friends who are also preparing for the journey, and let's start the class. Okay. Yesterday I told you and I asked you that why British literature is important. British literature is important because every other literature around the world that we are studying as part of our English syllabus, the Indian, American, African, Nigerian, Canadian, everything evolved through or you can say against the British influence. So somehow all around the world, the literature that you are studying or the writers getting influence and writing, all of them has been influenced by the British literature. Okay. So I hope you remember. We study British literature by the ages Old English that actually it started, then we move on to the or Anglo-Norman age, then medieval age, and so on. Then we have to remember the moments, ages wise, we have done moments, remember, moments and features. That is the important link with the authors, with their historical timelines. All these things you have to remember. For example, if there is a question, why do we call the 18th century the age of satire, or which novel is considered the first modern English novel, and there are options. What makes the romantic writers revolutionaries of imaginations, which was the first important work in Old English, the writer is anonymous. So everything we have to remember by the ages. Beowulf, that suppose Beowulf is the earliest surviving English epic poem in the history of English literature, and the writer is anonymous. Then remember the important points with the ages. 1476. 1476 we have a Caxton's printing press. This is what we remember, printing press. Okay. Then 1600 Shakespeare dominate this era. So 1600 is known, or you can say the Elizabethan age, Renaissance age. These ages dominated by Shakespeare. Then 1798 revolutionary age, you can say, or the romantic age, or the you can say uh, the age of Wordsworth. All the romantic ages writers who have explored the human nature, human mind. Then 1660 monarchy, restoration of a monarchy. That is also the age of Dryden, restoration of a monarchy. So in British literature, everything is important. Okay, monarchy. Then you have 1798, 1837. 1837 you have Victorian period, very important. And 1922 onwards we enter into the modern age and the postmodern age. Okay, that were on peak. So this is how you have to remember on tip everything. So majorly I just want to say, once you understand British literature, it will become easier for you to get the idea or get an overview about all the literature around the world. So yesterday we have discussed till Charles Dickens' work and the important characters. This is going to be a one-shot revision and plus your class, because we are already into month of December. So if you want the PDF, you can comment, you can join the channel. So from today we are going to discuss about the D.H. Lawrence. Remember yesterday we have discussed about the Geoffrey Chaucer, the major comments by different critics and the writers, then Shakespeare's same, and all the characters. His life was divided into four period and all the works of period. Then similarly, Geoffrey Chaucer, then Charles Dickens, then Thomas Hardy, and now we are going to discuss about D.H. Lawrence. D.H. Lawrence here, D.H. Lawrence, David Herbert Lawrence, 1885 to 1930. Remember the birth year also because it appears in chronology question. Is a major 20th century modernist who critiqued industrial modernity and mechanized civilization. So D.H. Lawrence is very important. Okay, remember. Very important. He explored sexuality, instinct, eros, and vitality as healing forces. It is said that he was the one who started talking about the sexuality through the work. He advocated a religion of blood consciousness. Remember, very important, it is a instinctual life. He also developed a psychological realism. Psychological realism developed by D.H. Lawrence. Remember, he explored sexuality in the work, and he also advocated the religion of blood consciousness. He was influenced by Freudian and Jungian ideas, but uniquely he was anti-Freudian in emphasis. He was somehow influenced, but he was also anti. He was persecuted for obscenity, making him central to debates about censorship, morality, and modernism. Remember, his many of the work was banned. His works were burned during World War I. He is central to war panic, state surveillance, and cultural intolerance. His many of the works born because of the obscenity in the work that he has presented. Remember, he was the writer who openly talked about sexuality in the work. He was the key figure in English studies, psychoanalysis in literature, eco-criticism, sexuality studies, feminist debates, and post-humanist readings. Okay, so that is why we study D.H. Lawrence because he is important. And one important line about him that you must know, that he believed in blood over intellect. It was the primacy of instinct over reason, according to D.H. Lawrence. Now, central theme that he used to explore in his work was industrialization and industrialization versus nature. It means a human spirit versus mechanized society, mining communities, industrial alienation. He also, one of the critics, F.R. Lewis, saw Lawrence as a savior of a modern civilization. So who said a savior of modern civilization to D.H. Lawrence? It was a F.R. Lewis. Okay, because of his the exploration of industrialization versus nature. Then another theme that he has explored, sexuality and human relationship, sex as a spiritual regenerative force, critic of Victorian repression. So one of the critic, Kate Millett, condemned Lawrence's gender politics in Sexual Politics 1970 work. So Kate Millett was the one critic who has discussed about his gender politics in Sexual Politics work, that is in 1970. Okay, this is how you can remember. Individual versus society, the another theme, individual versus society, in which he has discussed the conflict between personal instinct and the societal norms. What are the societal norms, protocols, rules, regulations, and how you personally behave, and what you should feel like that you should do. Okay, blood consciousness versus mind consciousness. Remember, this is very important, appears in exam already. From fantasia of the unconscious, instinctual knowledge, and rational thought. Another theme that he has explored, psychology and unconscious desire. He was influenced of Freud and Jung. That is why he has talked about the sexual trauma, repression, and martial conflict. Remember the Freudian Jung, he has talked about the Oedipus complex. So he is saying the same thing that what he has talked about throughout his work. Then let's see the another theme, nature, mysticism, and eco-philosophy. Nature, mysticism, and eco-philosophy. In this, he said that human connection with elemental forces, that is the fire, water, earth, and sexuality. So that is why his many of the works were burned. We will discuss later that. Now, major works of D.H. Lawrence that you must know and divided into novels, poetry, and play. So in novels, The White Peacock, 1911, pastoral. It is based on pastoral class tension and early naturalism. Then another one we have Sons and Lovers, 1913. This is very important work based on Oedipal tensions, mother-son bond, industrial Midlands. Okay, remember the Oedipus Rex work, Electra complex. So it is based on the mother-son bond. The rainbow 1915 important appears in chronology question, so must remember. Spiritual quest, individual desire versus social morality banned. This work, The Rainbow 1950 was banned. Women in Love 1920, it is based on dark modernism. It highlights dark modernism, sexual politics and critics of industrial war culture. Now you know that why his many of the works were banned or burned, and why he was also persecuting for being, or you can say bringing the obscenity in the work. The Lost Girl 1920, in this he escapes sexuality, Italy as a regeneration. Then another work that you remember, Aaron's Rod 1920, Individual Quest, Political Disillusionment, based on Kangaroo 1923. It is based on Australian politics and anti-authoritarianism. Then another one we have The Boy in the Bush 1924. It is a collaboration that highlights the masculine identity. And another one, The Plumed Serpent 1926. It is based on the Mexico quasi-religious revival at that shows the authoritarian charisma. Okay. Then the last novel we have, Lady Chatterley's Lover. Very important work for the exam. 1928. It shows the sexual liberation, class, censorship battles. And last one, you can remember peak modernist phase that you can say D.H. Lawrence faced was for the work The Rainbow and Women in Love. These were the two work that is, you can say, it was the peak moment. It was the peak phase in D.H. Lawrence life, or you can say literary career specifically. So the work that you must go through in detail, The Sons and Lovers, The Rainbow, Women in Love, and Lady Chatterley's Lover. Okay, for the exam perspective. Then short story collection you also remember. Short story collection you have The Russian Officer 1914, that shows the authoritarian violence and repression. England, My England 1920, which was based on war and Englishnesses. And The Woman Who Rode Away 1928, that highlights the spiritual alienation. These are the short story collection. You can cross check the year and please notify me. Poetry you have Love Poems and Others 1913, Amorous 1916, Birds, Beasts and Flowers 1923. It is based on mystical nature poetry. Pansies 1929 and Last Poems 1932. Okay. In poetry, you can say the poetry style of writing by D.H. Lawrence was free verse, natural symbolism, and intense emotionality that he has given in all this poem. Okay. Essays of D.H. Lawrence, Study of Thomas Hardy 1914, Psychoanalysis and the Unconscious 1921, important Fantasia of the Unconscious 1922, Apocalypse 1931. Okay, remember the essays, poetry and novel by D.H. Lawrence. Now let's see why Lawrence is controversial. So because of his the openness in the work that he has given and explored. So his novels banned in the UK, USA for obscenity. He was prosecuted during World War I for alleged spying. Lady Chatterley's Lover central to 1960 landmark obscenity trial. and feminist critic him for patriarchal depictions of women. So he has been criticized by the feminist writers, the female writers, for depicting the woman in the work the way he should not done. So that is how his life was controversial. Now, the point for exam pointers that you have to remember, F.R. Lewis called Lawrence the great moralist of the 20th century. Who addressed the great moralist of the 20th century to D.H. Lawrence? So it was F.R. Lewis. Okay, remember. Then another T.S. Eliot, the critic, he also criticized Lawrence's philosophy as adolescent. Who criticized D.H. Lawrence as adolescent? So it was a T.S. Eliot and not serious metaphysics. Adolescent and not serious metaphysics was criticized by T.S. Eliot to D.H. Lawrence. Okay. Then Raymond Williams also said something. He said he read Lawrence through culture and society theory. Then Kate Millett in Sexual Politics 1970 work, she saw his fiction as deeply misogynistic. Okay. Harold Bloom also, he canonizes Lawrence for psychological depth, and Camelia Paglia we have, she praised him as the poet of a Dionysian sexuality and natural energy. So this is how what critic criticizes the work or the writer. So somebody likes the work and somebody criticizes the work very badly. Okay, so this is what the critics has given their point of view about D.H. Lawrence and why his work was banned. We all know the work that I thought too you should know a little bit about. So the Sons and Lovers, one or two time why it happens in my video. So Sons and Lovers 1913, it was a set in the industrial Midlands of England, remember. Sons and Lovers is a semi-autobiographical novel tracing the life of Paul Morrell, his family dynamics and his struggle for personal and emotional independence. So this novel Sons and Lovers is set in remember, Midlands of England. Then Sons and Lovers depict it is a semi-autobiography, okay, remember. Then it traces the life of the protagonist, Paul. Paul Morrell, okay? Paul Morrell and his family dynamics and his how he struggled for personal and emotional independency throughout his life. We will see in this work, Sons and Lovers, 1913 by D.H. Lawrence. So here you can remember Paul Morrell grows up torn between his deep attachment to his mother and his romantic relationships. So it is, you can somehow, that is how why it has been compared with the Oedipus complex. Oedipus, yes, complex. Okay. It was inspired by Lawrence's own life. The novel explores the emotional entanglement and sexual awakening. The way Electra complex, that you somehow feel attracted towards the opposite gender. So this is what it means. So it is, you can say, semi autobiographical. That is why it has been said here. It explores the novel sexual awakening and based on Lawrence's own life depicts the story. Now now the character you must remember, Mrs. Gertrude Morrell. You can remember the Paul, main character of Sons and Laurels. Paul Morrell is, you can it is the struggle between love and guilt. Okay, love and guilt. Love and guilt. So this is the main thing you have to remember about the Paul Morrell, the main character of the Sons and Lovers by D.H. Lawrence. So here the first character, Mrs. Gertrude Morrell, mother of Paul, is a strong, ambitious woman trapped in a loveless marriage to Mr. Morrell, a coal miner. She channels her aspiration and emotional energy into her sons, especially Paul, creating an intense Oedipal bond. Relationship, the romantic relationship with his mother. Paul Morrell, we have here protagonist. He struggles between familial loyalty and romantic desire with his mother. He is highly sensitive, artistic and introspective. So that is why if he is sensitive, he was somehow suffering between the love and the guilt that he was sharing with his mother. Okay. Sensitive artist torn between love and guilt. Next, Miriam Levers, we have a devout intellectual girl represents spiritual love. Their relationship is intense but emotionally fraught. Clara Dawes, we have a more sensual and modern woman represents erotic love and independence. Their affair is passionate but ultimately unstable. Then we have Arthur Morel. Paul's older brother is ambitious but weak, representing societal pressure. William Morel, the younger brother, dies young, adding to Paul's emotional burden. What critics has said about this work? Let me tell you. Freudian influence, Oedipal dynamics are central. Lawrence diverges by emphasizing blood consciousness over intellect. Okay, so here it is the Freudian, according to Freudian influence, it is said that the character is more attracted because of the, you can say, the blood consciousness. It might be, but there is, they have given the comparison between the intellectual also. Okay, then industrial realism, on the basis of that coal mining backdrop explores the alienation and depression. Critical reception, this work was praised by F.R. Lewis for moral depth, but some critics see the mother son bond as psychologically oppressive. Okay, why? Because it is a major Oedipal novel that explores the tension between sexual desire and maternal attachment. So that is why many of the critics has criticized this work badly. Now another work, Lady Chatterley's Lover. This controversial novel explores the class, sexuality, and emotional fulfillment in post-World War I England. Constance, you can say Connie or Chatterley, the character protagonist we have here, is married to Sir Clifford Chatterley, a wealthy aristocrat. Clifford becomes paralyzed from the waist down due to war injuries, and their marriage becomes emotionally and physically distant. So here Constance struggles with sexual frustration and emotional isolation. So she begins an affair with Oliver Mellors, remember the name, the gamekeeper, who is a man of instinct, vitality and simplicity. So that is why the novel critiques class barriers, the sterility of industrialized society and emotional repression. That what the main character Chatterley here explores or try to depicts. Major themes that we will find in this work are sexuality as liberation. That means the sexual fulfillment is linked to emotional and spiritual vitality. Everything is tried to show here by D.H. Lawrence is a sexual liberation by the character. Class conflict. Class conflict, the Mellors represent working class honesty. Clifford represents aristocratic sterility. Industrialization and alienation, that shows the war and mechanization have stifled human instincts. Psychological realism that explores the desires, frustrations and moral dilemmas of the human or human life. Minor characters, major characters you must remember after the theme. Constant, the Connie Chatterley protagonist who seeks love, passion and personal freedom, sexual freedom, or you can say sexual liberation. Sir Clifford Chatterley, the husband, disabled husband, intellectual but emotionally cold. Oliver Meller's gamekeeper represents instinctual natural vitality. And the minor characters, Mrs. Bolton, a housekeeper, observes and comments on class and social dynamics. Michelices, we have clergyman represents a societal morality and other aristocratic acquaintances who provide contrast between social classes. So these were the highlights of the major and minor characters. Okay, remember. Now, critical highlights you can remember here, the censorship history. If we will put the work here, the 1960 trial in the UK set precedent for literary freedom. The novel's frank discussion of sex challenged Victorian prudery. That is why this work was, you can say, banned. Okay. So this was the Lady Chatterley's Lover, the extreme level, controversial, because it explores the open Sexuality, Class, Emotional Fulfillment in Post-World War First by the protagonist herself. Let's move on to the next work. This work was also criticized by many critics. So here, according to Lawrence philosophy, Mellers embodies blood consciousness, instinctual natural living, and feminist debate, if we will see. Critics like Kate Millett see Coney's agency limited by Lawrence's gender portrayal. But it also, some argues she represents female sexual awakening, female sexual desire. Modernist style Modernist style narrative blends you will find here realism, interior monologue, and symbolic imagery. So that is why D.H. Lawrence is the modernist who turned sexuality, instinct, and human vitality into a philosophical resistance against an increasingly industrial and mechanized civilization. So I hope everything and all the points highlighted here get got clear to you. Okay, about D.H. Lawrence. Now let's discuss about the John Bunyan 1628 to 1688 who was a Christian preacher. One two question we can also find if NTA put notice here. So he was a Christian preacher and writer. Bunyan is most known for his allegorical religious works. Major works remember the Pilgrim Progress. The question made from Pilgrim Progress. He was born in 1628 Elstow, Bedfordshire, England. Occupation he was a preacher and Puritan, belongs to Puritan. So he was a religious affiliation, that means non-conformist Protestant. Major events in his life you must remember. He converted to Christianity in 1653. This has been appeared in the exam after a period of spiritual struggle. He was imprisoned for 12 years, that is from the 1660 to 1672, for preaching without license. Why he has been imprisoned? Because he was preaching without license under the Conventicle Act. For how many years? 12 years. And the year 1660 to 1672. Okay, 1672, around almost 12 years. Literary significance in his life. Bunyan wrote in vernacular English, the everyday daily life language that we spoke and find easy to understand, making religious text accessible to common people. That is why he was known as religious allegorist, blending Puritan theology with the popular storytelling. His work combines mysticism, morality, and imaginative narrative. Okay, the major work by him, sorry, tongue twisting. Major works, remember, the Pilgrim Progress, very important questions frame from this only. Pilgrim's Progress, Part 1, 1678, allegorical novel based on Christian journey of the soul, salvation, temptation, perseverance, and divine grace. Okay, the second part of Pilgrim Progress, 1684, it is also an allegorical novel, focuses on Christian and her children, communal and domestic aspects of a faith. The first one depicts the Christian journey of the soul, salvation, temptation, perseverance, and second part focuses on Christian and her children and domestic aspects of a faith in a human life. Another work, Grace abounding to the chief of sinners, 1666. It is an autobiography, spiritual memoir, you can say, Bunyan's own conversion and spiritual struggles highlighted in this work. So, Grace Abounding to the Chief of Sinners, 1666. Puritan theology based on the life and death of Mr. Badman, 1680. It is an allegory, didactic in narrative and moral corruption based on vice and consequences, and it is a societal critique. The Holy War, 1682, it is also an allegory and epic. Spiritual battle for the city of man's soul, sin versus salvation. In Holy War, you will find the sin versus salvation. The theme majorly depicts. Then other tracts and sermons, which was around 1660s to 1680s. Okay. Here is a little bit info about the Pilgrim's Progress that you can remember. So protagonist, it is a part one. Protagonist, here you will find Christian burdened by the weight of sin, journeys from the city of destruction to the celestial city. Okay, and major episodes, major event in this work you will find here. Christian, the protagonist, reads the book Bible and feels despair over sin. He escapes his city, meets evangelist who guides him. He encounters obstacles, slough of despond, wicket gate, hill difficulty, valley of the shadow of death. He also battles Apollyon, the demon of temptation. He receives help from faithful, hopeful, and others, and also he reaches the celestial city, that is heaven, symbolizing salvation. Okay, major characters throughout his journey, the Christian met the people. Christian, the protagonist, every man seeking salvation, evangelist, a spiritual guide represents God's word, faithful companion, martyr-like figure, hopeful companion, later friend and guide, Apollyon, demon, temptation, and evil, who tries to distract you. Worldly wise man represents worldly distraction and false guidance, and giant disappear and doubting castle fear. Spiritual trials and doubt shows disappear. Okay. Minor characters, you can also see Mr. By-End's opportunism and hypocrisy. Pliable and obstinate represents responsiveness or stubbornness towards the Christian path. Okay. Vanity Fair denizens, symbol of materialism, temptation, and sin. Okay. The themes that John Bunyan has explored: salvation and Christian allegory that shows the soul's journey from sin to salvation, perseverance and faith. Struggles are necessary to reach the celestial city, that is heaven. Puritan morality and theology, that means it highlights the importance of repentance, regret, regression of life, grace, and God's providence. Spiritual warfare, it depicts evil manifest as obstacles, doubts, and temptations. If you will find one who tries to distract you, who will try to create obstacles in your life, your mind will always in a doubt. Allegorical representation of society, it shows human vices, virtues, and societal pressures that illustrated symbolically. Okay, it is one of the earliest and most popular English allegories. Okay, remember. So I hope everything is clear about John Bunyan, but you have to remember he was a preacher and writer, and he was majorly known for his allegorical religious, and the major work by him was The Pilgrim's Progress. The Pilgrim's Progress. He has been imprisoned for 12 years, which was the year 1662 1672. Why? Because he was preaching without a license under the Conventicle Act. Okay, remember everything. Now let's see the next writer. In fiction and short stories, drama, I have play also. I have highlighted the works that you will in very much detail you can see. Now let's discuss about Oliver Goldsmith. The birth year is 1728 to 1774. He was an Irish-born poet, essayist, novelist, and playwright. Okay. He was the part of age of transition. Oliver Goldsmith was part of the age of transition between Augustan neoclassicism and Romanticism. He was the member of Dr. Johnson's literary circle, that is the club. He was known for human satire, moral vision, and sentimental humor. Okay, he was also opposed excessive rationalism of neoclassicism, embraced a humanized nature, feeling, and simplicity, a precursor to Wordsworthian romanticism. Remember, Oliver Goldsmith, Irish-born poet, essayist, novelist, and playwright. He was the part of Age of Transition, Augustan neoclassicism, and that also romanticism. He was also the member of Dr. Johnson's literary circle, and the name was The Club. He was known for majorly human satire, his moral vision, and also his sentimental humor. Major works by Oliver Goldsmith we have that you should prepare. Going in detail, The Vicar of Wakefield, 1766, it is a novel. The Deserted Village, 1770, it is a poem. She Stoops to Conquer, 1773, it is a play. So The Vicar of Wakefield, The Deserted Village, She Stoops to Conquer, it is a novel, it is a poem, and it is also it is a play. It is in chronology. It is 66, 70 and 73. So 66 you have to plus 4, here you have to plus 3. It is in chronology. Work in focus that you go in detail. The Vicar of Wakefield, 1766, which was a novel. The genre of the work is a sentimental and domestic fiction. The work is. And here the major character that is highlighted, Dr. Primrose, a good-hearted vicar, undergoes financial ruin, kidnapping and scandal. Ultimately, virtue triumphs and his family is restored. The major thing that you have to remember is all the characters. Dr. Charles Primrose, the protagonist, a vicar, moral vicar, that is a hero, embodiment of benevolence. Mrs. Primrose, his wife, proud and concerned with appearance. Olivia and Sophia Primrose, romantic, sentimental daughters of Mr. and Mrs. Charles Primrose. George Primrose, son, idealistic faces, employment crisis, son of Primrose, the protagonist. Mr. Thornhill, the villain, who was a deceiver and seducer of Olivia, the daughter of Charles Primrose. Sir William Thornhill, benefactor, uncle of Thornhill, and who embodies virtue. Jenkinson, who was a trickster and becomes helper later to Charles Primrose. Okay. Minor character you can remember, the farmer Flamborough, Square Wilbert, and Burchell. Okay. The themes that this work explores: sentimental morality, appearance versus reality, virtue in adversity, social hypocrisy, providence, and redemption. Okay. What the critics has said about this work. So critical insight you can find here that the work has been praised for moral realism and sweetness of temper. So sweetness of temper for the work, The Wake of Vicarfield, Dr. Primrose, the major character, and Oliver Goldsmith. Okay, Dr. Primrose is one of literature's great portrait of a navy goodness. Remember. This work, She Stoops to Conquer, this is a play. I have already discussed this. Okay, but still, if while discussing about the writer, we are discussing their work also. So here is a little bit information about She Stoops to Conquer. The work's genre is comedy of manners. Okay, it is a landmark in restoring laughing comedy over sentimental comedy. This work is funny. Young Charles Marlowe, socially shy with women of rank but bold with lower class, lower class women, who was tricked into believing the Hardcastle's house is an inn. So here, Kate Hardcastle, that is, stoops to disguised lower class status to win his affection. And it is a series of that how after entering and misunderstanding the Hardcastle's house as inn, that is the hotel, somehow everything, the series of the comic relief and misunderstanding, how in series creates and what happened at the last, this story depicts this play. It is a series of misunderstanding, country versus city, manners, comics, and oppositions that She Stoops to Conquer highlights. Okay, major characters you must remember about the work. These type of videos in like they are going to be helpful for all of the English literature exam that we all are going to appear for. So major character Charles Marlowe, shy gentleman, comic hero. Kate Hardcastle, clever heroine, disguise herself a protagonist. Mr. Hardcastle, kind, traditional gentleman. Mrs. Hardcastle, we have a pretentious loves fashion and London society. Tony Lumpkin, who was a trickster, rural comic spread and causes mischief. George Hastings we have, who was a Marlowe's friend, and Constance Neville, who was a Mrs. Hardcastle's ward, Tony's intended against her will. Okay, remember. The theme that she stoops to conquer, explore, class and disguise, country versus city manners, sentimental versus laughing comedy, courtship and misunderstanding, and gender performance. Okay. Now, who was the critic that saw it as reviving true comic spirit? So it was Johnson. It is also an anti-sentimental movement pioneer. The work is anti-sentimental. Now let's see the next. So in play category, there are after She Stoops to Conquer, Oliver Goldsmith has given us a lot of plays so that everything is mentioned. The Good Natured Man, 1768, I have mentioned here. In then we will move on into the poetry collection of Oliver Goldsmith. And the important one we have the Deserted Village 1770. Okay. 1770, The Deserted Village. It is a pastoral elegy which is in a didactic poem. It shows the decline of rural life due to enclosure, industrial capitalism, and aristocratic greed of a human. So, it is a very few point I have highlighted as the summary. So, it is a fictional village, Auburn. Remember, the village name Auburn is destroyed by landlord displacement. Also, this work celebrates simple rustic virtues and critiques luxury, corruption, and depopulation. Remember, Pastoral Elegy, The Deserted Village, 1770 by Oliver Goldsmith. Pastoral Elegy, Decline of Rural Life, that themes highlight, and it is a fictional village called Auburn. These are the minor things, major things that you must remember. From this poem, you have to remember line. Here I'll fares the land to hastening ills of prey. This line anticipates romantic nostalgia and social critique. Okay, remember. Then another poem we have The Traveller, 1764, which is also important. It is a philosophical poem comparing happiness across nations. It is a cosmopolitan reflective writing during his European travels of Oliver Goldsmith. It shows influence of Pope in style and Montesquieu in cultural comparison. Then important essays by Oliver Goldsmith must remember Citizen of the World 1762. It is a series of letters by Chinese observer in London. It satirizes the society. Okay. This work inquiries into the present state of polite learning in Europe 1759 and also cultural criticism that laments decline of the true taste. So, Citizen of the World 1762, it is a series of letters by Chinese observer in London. Then another essay. This is the only essay by Oliver Goldsmith, Citizen of the World. If there are many, maybe I have missed. What were the Oliver Goldsmith's writing style? It is popular that's why I have mentioned. He was in clear, elegant prose. He was writing very clearly and elegantly. It shows he uses the simple diction with emotional depth. He also blends satire with sentiment. He uses the anti-Augustan pomp pro-humanity and pro-nature, and he also moderate moral vision without harsh cynicism. This work that he has uses in was based on comic but compassionate. Whatever he was trying to show throughout the work, it was a compassion all throughout the characters. That you can take the example of She Stoops to Conquer or The Deserted Village or any other work. Okay. Now, after that, what are the important points that you have to remember about Goldsmith that you must not miss? So, he was a bridge figure from the Augustan to early Romantic sensibility. He was the part of Johnsonian circle, that is Johnson, Burke, Reynolds, and Garrick. Johnsonian circle, all the writers mentioned here. His works reflect middle class morality and rural nostalgia. Okay. His drama contributed to the victory of laughing comedy, example She Stood to Conquer, after the dominance of sentimental comedy. Okay, these are the highlighted points of Oliver Goldsmith. So I hope all the important points about the Thomas Hardy, Charles Dickens, Shakespeare, Geoffrey Chaucer, D.H. Lawrence. Then we have finished Oliver Goldsmith. Clear to you. Now another writer, Sir Walter Scott. Important to know. Remember here it is I have highlighted the Wizard of the North, father of historical novel and Scottish romantic novelist, nationalist. Sorry, the Wizard of the North, father of historical novel and Scottish romantic nationalist. If any of you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. You can share among your friends who are also preparing for the same. Or if you want the PDF, you can simply join the channel and let me know. I will share. He was born in Edinburgh, Scotland, trained as an advocate, that is lawyer. He was romantic writer, folklorist, and antiquarian editor. He was the pioneer of historical novel in English. Remember who? Sir Walter Scott. That is why father of historical novel it is mentioned here. He published early poems anonymously and later dominated fiction. He was the founder of Waverley Novels. Who? Sir Walter Scott. And remember, he has written 27 novels under the Waverley Novels. His 27 novels is known as the Waverley Novels, which shaped the European historical fiction. Okay, Waverley Novels 27 shaped the European historical fiction. He was closely associated with James Ballantine Press, whose bankruptcy led Scott to write furiously to repay his debts. Okay, he was the key figure of Scottish Enlightenment and Romantic imaginations. So remember the year birth 1771 and 1832. So obviously he will fall in the Romantic age also. Okay, remember all the highlighted points. Major works by genre it is mentioned here. So first we have poetry. Before becoming a novelist, Sir Walter Scott was one of Britain's most celebrated poets. And while being a celebrated poet, he has given a lot of important poems. And here are the list. The Lay of the Last Minstrel, 1805, important. Marmion, 1808. It is a famous line of this poem. Oh, what a tangled web we weave. The Lady of the Lake 1810 set in Scottish Highlands, Rokeby 1813 and The Lord of the Isles 1815. Okay, remember before becoming a novelist, so he was a celebratory poet and all these poems were written by him. While writing all these poems, he has rivalry with Byron. Why? Because Byron's popularity overshadows Scott's poetry. That is how you can say here Scott turns into fiction. That means Scott started writing fictional work. So everything is mentioned. Now Waverley novels, let's discuss. So Waverley novels, historical novels, Scott published almost all his novels anonymously, and anonymously the name was author of Waverley. Remember, Sir Walter Scott published almost all his novels anonymously as the author of Waverley. So the first novel is Waverley 1814. Okay, one second. Discussing class altogether without any break. It's like so Waverley in 1814. It was the first major English historical novel by Sir Walter Scott, and it is set during the Jacobite Rising of 1745. Okay. The protagonist, Edward Waverley, who was an English soldier torn between Hanoverian duty and Scottish Highland romance. The characters we have here: Fergus, Mac Ivor, Flora, and Vic Ian War. The themes that this work Waverley explore: nationalism, rebellion, and cultural conflict. Okay. Then another from the same Waverley novels, we have Guy Mannering 1815. It is in chronology. Waverley was 1814, Guy Mannering 1815. It is based on an orphan identity, astrology, and Scottish landscape. These are not was that important. So it was important, so I have mentioned, but one or two points for these remaining works you will find. The Antiquary 1816, it is a semi-autobiographical antiquarian obsession. Rob Roy 1817, it is set around 1715 Rising. It romanticized Highland outlaw Rob Roy MacGregor. Themes that this work explores: English-Scottish identity and economic modernization. Okay. Then, in the same series, The Heart of Middleton, 1818, it is the one of Scott's greatest novels. The Heart of Middleton, 1818. Heroine, you must remember, it is already appeared in the PYQs, previous year exam, Jenny Deans, who was a humble dairy maid. And this work highlights the issues justice, female virtue, and moral fortitude. Okay, this novel was set around the 1736 Porteous riots. Okay, remember Porteous riots, which work the heart of the Middleton 1818. The heroine, the character here we have Janie Deans. Okay, the Bride of Lammermoor. This is also important. The tragic romance. This work highlights the tragic romance of Lucy Ashton and Edgar Ravenswood. Okay, remember. Ivanhoe. This work is also important. Always appear in the exam. Set in 12th century England during Richard the Lionheart's reign. It depicts the Saxon Norman tensions and the chivalry code. Scott's most famous novel internationally, which is Ivanhoe 1819. Okay, the main characters of this work you must remember: Wilfred of Ivanhoe, who was a knight loyal to King Richard; Rowena, his love interest; Rebecca, a Jewish healer and tragic heroine; Isaac of York, Rebecca's father; Prince John, ambitious usurper; Robin Hood, Locksley help restore justice; and Brian D. Boyce Gilbert, who was a Templar knight and antagonist. Okay, remember conflicts that this work highlights: Norman versus sections, chivalry, and anti-Semitism. Themes in nation building and race, religion, justice. Okay, in the same series, the another work, The Monastery 1820, it is based on the Reformation period supernatural White Lady of Avenel. The Abbot 1820, it shows the Mary Queen of Scots and Loch Leven escape. Kenilworth 1820, it depicts the Elizabethan intrigue, the Earl of Leicester and Amy Robstart. The Pirate 1820, it depicts the Orkney and Shetland Islands. Okay. Then we have a Red Gauntlet 1824. It depicts the Jacobite themes revisited epistolary sections. This work is Woodstock 1826. It is based on English Civil War and Charles II. So remember, Sir Walter Scott in Waverley novels, he has total written 27 historical novels from 1814 to 1832. Okay. Here I have mentioned only 13. But the important one I have told you, I told you this one, you can go in detail, this one, then the Heart of Middleton, then the first one we have the Waverley 1814. Okay, remember. Now let's see what are the themes that Sir Walter Scott has explored. He has explored historical realism. Scott merges fiction with actual historical events. His method that he used in his work was remediating the past. That means giving ordinary people roles in national history. Second theme, cultural conflict and national identity, that he shows Highland versus Lowlands. Okay, England versus Scotland, Norman versus sections, and Catholic versus Protestant. Romantic fascination with the past, third theme, that ruins customs, folklore, and feudalism highlights modernization versus tradition, that highlights the economic and political changes that creates social tensions. Ordinary people versus history agents. Remember the character Jeannie Dean's heart of Middleton embodies moral heroism. Okay, gender, virtue, and moral integrity, and that also highlights the strong female protagonist like we have Janie Deans and Rebecca and Flora. And the characters that appear in the exam, the characters by Sir Walter Scott that always appears in exam. So here I have mentioned exam focus. Edward Beverley, conflicted English officer. Rob Roy, Highland outlaw, cultural hero. Jeannie Deans, moral heroine, humble but strong. Rebecca Ivanhoe, in the work you will find Jewish healer, moral center of novel. Wilfred of Ivanhoe, knighted hero, Richard the lion-hearted disguised king, Fergus MacIvor, Jacobite chief, and Flora MacIvor, Scottish nationalist. So these are the characters that always appear in the exam. Okay, so I hope you have liked the video, everybody. There are important things that I must tell you. Remember. Yes, the style and technique of Sir Walter Scott that we find in his work, he mixed romance and historical realism. His rich use of local color, Scott dialect, and folklore he used majorly. He interweaving parallel narratives, that means a blend of novel plus common folk. He uses the historical documents, ballads, and oral storytelling, and his narrative voice combines antiquarian detail with ironic distance. And this thing is important, the critical reception, how critic has given his point of view of about Sir Walter Scott. So George Lucas, Scott is the first master of the historical novel. Who said first master of the historical novel to Sir Walter Scott? It is George Lucas. Thomas Carlyle said he admired his depiction of a Scottish tradition. Who admired Sir Walter Scott for his Scottish tradition is Thomas Carlyle. Coleridge, what did he say? He praised his geniality and invention. Who praised Sir Walter Scott for his geniality and invention? So it is Coleridge. S.T. Coleridge. Now, T.S. Eliot said Scott is a founder of cultural nationalism in modern fiction and European impact, inspired Balzac, Pushkin, and Manzoni and Tolstoy. Okay, so these are the important points that critics has said. He has received by the different critics about him, how he depicts everything throughout the work. So how do you like the class? First part we have already done. This is going to be the second work, and the remaining, all the major British writers we still have, like Jane Austen we have to talk about. So remember, and let's meet in the next class. The video I don't want to make it too long. Okay, so thank you so much for joining, everybody. I'm thinking to upload the literary theory criticism in 9:30 at 9:30. So any of you have to comment if you are going to be available or not. So thank you so much for joining. Do take care of yourself, and bye bye.